Hey y'all. Guys, I'm so excited for this intro. So I'm sure you guys can read by the title. If you don't follow me on social media, you guys are probably like, what is going on? But I'm going to explain it to you guys right here, right now. So if you follow me on social media, you all know that true crime, jail stuff, anything like that is like something that is like super, I'm just into it. I'm into it. But I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to do the same old true crime, and there's already enough people that do that. They do it well, like Bailey Sarian. She does murder mystery makeup Mondays. There's people that do a good job at it, and I wanted to do something like that, but I wanted to do it different. I wanted it to be my own, and I wanted it to be something that is really not seen on YouTube already. So what this is called is Beauty and Documentary Breakdown. Whether it be a true crime documentary, a cold case documentary, a prison or jail documentary, or anything like that, we will be discussing either the documentary itself or individual episodes. For instance, in today's episode 1 of Beauty and Documentary Breakdown, we are discussing the Netflix documentary series called The Confession Tapes, which is individual episodes of different cases where they have used these odd interrogation tactics. And one episode we're going to discuss in particular in today's video is a 2-part episode called True East. And we're going to be discussing that. Just a little bit into The Confession Tapes on Netflix. Like I said, it's basically a breakdown of different cases where they have used really odd interrogation tactics, or like in this episode we're going to do today, using tactics that are illegal in the United States of America. Regardless of what it is, it's very interesting and has sunken me in, and it's all I've been thinking about, and I'm so excited we get to talk about the episode in season 1 that had me shooketh. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into episode 1 of Beauty and Documentary Breakdowns, The Confession Tapes, season 1, episode True East, part 1 and 2. So before I do go ahead and start with the very first episode of Beauty and Documentary Breakdown, I do just want to go ahead and let you guys know that if you are curious as to what products I use on my face during the video, they will all be in the description box below. Now let's go ahead and get into episode 1 of Beauty and Documentary Breakdown. Let's go. We're actually going to be discussing a specific episode. So in season 1, there's actually a 2-part episode called True East, part 1, part 2. And this is the case of Sebastian Burns and Atif Rifai. First off, I just want to say, keep in mind that these are 2 19-year-old boys. Keep that in mind. So on July 13th of 1994 at 2:01 a.m., there is a 911 call made in Bellevue, Washington. The caller on the other end is a man by the name of Sebastian Burns. He's a 19-year-old college student, and he seems very distraught. He is stuttering, and he's letting the 911 operator know that there's been a break-in. And he would later on the 911 call say that he is with a friend at his friend's house, and his parents, he keeps saying they're his parents, and then he says, we think, quote, we think they're dead. Then Sebastian also says on the 911 call that they don't feel safe and that they're going to wait for police outside. Upon arrival, the police are immediately struck with there being 2 already victims. So in the home, there is the mother of Atif Rifai. Her name is Sultana Rifai, and she is face down with severe head trauma, and she has a red garment over her head. Then as they go upstairs, They then find Dr. Tariq Rifai, which is Atif's father, in the bedroom, brutally murdered. And also a third victim, which at the time when the police arrived had not passed away yet. And that was Basma Rifai, and that was actually Atif's sister. Again, like I said, she was alive when the police initially got there, but later at the hospital, unfortunately, Basma would pass away. I'm also gonna unfortunately have to have music overgoing this because there is a severe storm going on outside, so I'm sorry, but yeah. Now, just to do a basic rundown of this particular night for Sebastian and Atif. They had been visiting with Atif's parents for 5 days and had spent the 5 days in the home with Atif's family. However, on the 5th day, they decided to go out and, run the town. Now, on this night, they went to a dinner first. Then they went across the street to a movie theater called The Lion King and seen a movie. And then they went to an all-night diner where they ate hash browns and had ice cream, and was asking there if there was any clubs around, and the waitress let them know that there was a club right down the street. And so they went to the club, but when they got there, the club was closing, so they went ahead and headed home, putting them home at around 2 o'clock in the morning. And they left around 8 p.m. It is also important to mention that the Rifais had just moved to Bellevue, Washington, and were originally from Canada. So they were new to the area. Like, there was still packing boxes when the investigators arrived on the home the night of the murder. Now, not only did these two boys, Burns and Rifai, state that they went to all these places the night of the murder, but there were witnesses at each place that said, oh, I remember he was wearing an army jacket. Oh yeah, I remember this, I remember him, I remember them because they were asking about bars, etc., etc. So they were remembered at every location. Just a little bit of background on the Rifais. An Islamic family, and they were very close and very intelligent. So the mother even had a master's degree. That was Sultana Rifai. She had a master's degree, but unfortunately, Basma Rifai, the sister, she was born with a medical condition. Sultana actually spent her time taking care of Basma. Now, the father was a doctor, Dr. Tariq Rifai, and he was a doctor in engineering. Very intelligent man, and it was going to be no different for Atif. He was very intelligent and he was going to attend Cornell. Very intelligent kid. Immediately upon arrival, the detective in the documentary, he says that they're both acting extremely odd, which for me, his odd behavior in regards to Sebastian is like they had been up all night and you all are, asking them these questions over and over. But Sebastian was just inquiring on how much longer the questions were going to be asked. He kept saying that he was extremely tired, and of course he's just witnessed something very heinous. So I don't know if that's, odd behavior. The investigator also brought up how, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the sister, Basma, was alive when the police first arrived on the scene, and they were asking Atif if he had tried anything to help her. And he said, no, there was nothing I could do, and, quote, I can't even put a Band-Aid on someone, end quote. Or he then informs the police that he is missing his Walkman and his VCR. And the police thought this was very odd, considering his mom, dad, and sister had just been brutally murdered. The police end up just, thinking, okay, these are young 19-year-old boys and they're probably exhausted. So they ended up putting them in a hotel nearby and leaving them with their cards to call with any thoughts, if they thought of anything or anything like that. Now, also in the documentary is, of course, Sebastian Burns' father, Dave Burns, and also Sebastian's girlfriend at the time named Sarah. Now, Sarah says that the morning after the murder, her parents are reading the newspaper and they see the murder in the paper of the Rafays. And so she calls Dave Burns, and of course Dave thinks that she's just calling to see if Sebastian is home yet. And so Dave lets her know pretty much immediately that Sebastian is still not home. And she says, no, Mr. Burns, have you seen the news? Have you seen the paper? Like, the Rafays were murdered. And so, of course, this being Sebastian's father, he calls him and is like, what is going on? You know, what's your status? What's happening? And he said, I don't know. They have us in this hotel. And so Dave Burns says, okay, well, I'm coming to get you. And Sebastian says, no, Dad, you can't come get us. They're making us stay in this hotel room. And Dave Burns says, have you been charged? And Sebastian says no. And so Dave Burns drives from Canada to America and picks up Atif and Sebastian. Should have they called the investigators and said, hey, I'm not only crossing state lines, I'm about to cross country lines? Yes, they should have, but they didn't. This pisses the police investigator off so much, y'all, that he leaks to the newspaper outlets that these two boys fled the country. And so this leads everybody to believe that these two boys committed this murder from the jump. The media started a frenzy. And around this time, of course, Atif's family needs to be buried. Now, instead of letting Atif know that there was going to be a funeral for his family, they bury his family without Atif even knowing. He finds out in the newspapers. And of course this upsets Atif. Of course it does. They end up having a memorial, and of course Atif's family is like, hey, we're having a memorial, yada yada. And so Atif is at this memorial, and y'all, there was media everywhere. Media outlets on every corner, and there's even clips. I'm going to show you a newspaper clip right now of Atif outside the memorial hugging a family member. And I mean, the media was just not cutting them a break. And because they wouldn't answer any questions at this memorial, the newspapers were just saying that they were just, you know, asshole teenagers who, you know, basically were proud of what they had done. Like, that's the way that the media and Bellevue police wanted everybody to view it. And even in one of the clips in the documentary, you see one of Atif's family members put her garment around his head and like rush him over to her family's car and like drives off. So I don't know, but there was a man who was in the entire documentary, and he was super informative, and he's actually what you call a wrongful conviction scholar, and he is very knowledgeable on this case. And he said that these boys were acting like normal boys at their age at 19 going through a situation like this. They were very goofy, they were very childlike, very immature, and he said that that was very normal for two boys their age, and that the way the media was making it was wrong. Now, the next big thing in the documentary is when they talk about the insurance policies that the Rafays had. And like I said, they were originally from Canada, so there were some Canadian insurance policies, and those didn't cash right away. However, American insurance policies were working a little bit different, and the Bellevue Police Department called the actual freaking insurance company and said, hey, Atif is a murder suspect. Like, we're just letting you guys know, like, he's a murder suspect for the murder of the people whose insurance policy you're about to cash out. And the insurance company was like, okay, is he being charged with anything? And the investigator says no. And they said, okay, then he's getting his money. They're saying that this is weird behavior, but Atif is a 19-year-old boy whose family is now dead, and he has no vehicle, he has no home. Atif goes out and purchases a brand new black Ford Mustang. I'm going to show you the only picture I could actually find of it online. They actually have clips of him driving it around in the Netflix documentary, but I couldn't find that picture. But here is a newspaper clipping of the car, but it was a convertible. They also consider it odd that after he got the car, him and Burns do go on a road trip. So they're thinking all of this is really odd behavior. And in the documentary, like I said, the wrongful conviction scholar, he says that none of this is odd and that all of this is stuff that two 19-year-old boys who had seen what they had seen and had that type of trauma this is things that they would do and how they would behave. Now, this is where the Bellevue Police Department isn't the only police per se involved. So in Canada, they're like FBI. It's called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, otherwise known as RCMP. They heard of these murders that happened in Washington and that the two suspects were residing in Canada. And so they get involved and they end up actually wiring the place where Atif and Sebastian are staying. Pretty early on, they realized that they're not dealing with just street criminals here. They realized that they are actually dealing with really smart boys. And so they decide that they're going to have to bring in the big guns. And here is where enters Mr. Big. So what is Mr. Big? Mr. Big is, number one, a tactic that is illegal in the United States and illegal now in Canada, I'm pretty sure. What it is a tactic for a confession. So they take, however many they need, very well-trained agents who are extremely trained in, manipulation and interrogation tactics. And basically it's a scene of scenarios. They get involved with the suspects regardless of what kind of crime it is. They get involved with the suspects, in this case, murder suspects, and they lead them to believe that they are part of this huge criminal organization. And in these scenarios, basically a scenario is a mission that they complete, like meeting them, becoming friends, gaining their trust, etc. Things like that. And through this, they obviously meet Sebastian, and Sebastian is a little bit more vulnerable. Sebastian was having a hard time finding a job. Sebastian was having a really hard time moving on with life after all of this happened. And the Mr. Big situation definitely was something that Sebastian could do. It was like a criminal gang. And that was the Mr. Big tactic, was to make them feel special and to make them feel like they could be a part of this organization, the organization could help them. But in order for the help from the organization, you have to be honest and you have to tell me exactly what you did. The two involved in the Mr. Big with the RCMP, their names were Gary and Al. And again, you guys, their entire mission is confession. That is all it is. That's their only mission, is for a confession. Now, like I said previously, their house was already wired. So this was a big thing for the Mr. Big project, because now they know that Burns is going to get his haircut at 2 o'clock on Saturday, so we can bump into him there, and that's where we can start the relationship. Now, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and bring in another person into the mix, and his name is Jimmy Miyoshi. Now, he was pretty much living with Burns and Morphe at the time, but he still wasn't going to see Al and Gary with the Mr. Big deal. Neither was Raphae. He was not involved in it either. It was only Sebastian, for the longest, who had anything to do with the Mr. Big situation. They're asking Sebastian, like, we read in the paper that you committed a murder. We need to know the facts. We need to know, did you commit this murder? You know, what is the deal with this? And Sebastian keeps saying, no, we had nothing to do with it. There were witnesses who seen us at movie theaters and diners and restaurants and told investigators that we weren't there. We had nothing to do with it. And in the beginning, Sebastian had no information. He didn't know Jack. Gary and Al, they were very aggressive. So they would say, quote, stop effing bullshitting me. I'm not an idiot. You're bullshitting. I know when you're bullshitting, end quote. They would also make statements like, we're not going to pay for something that you did. They would let him know that if he told them what happened, that they would be able to help him, that unless Sebastian put his trust in Gary and Al, that they wouldn't be able to help. During this time, there was evidence and leads coming in, you guys, left and right, and not just tiny little leads either. There were 3 pretty large leads that were brought into play very early on, one of which was brought in before the murder even happened, which was a tip to the actual Bellevue Police Department that someone called in and said, hey, I'm just letting you know, I heard that there is a hit on a family who just moved to Bellevue, an Islamic family who just moved to Bellevue. Now, guys, what really frustrates me is that the Bellevue Police Department, that lead investigator, did not go and look into any of these leads. And that literally gives me anxiety. Another really big lead at the time was this organization called Al-Fuqra, which is a U.S. terrorist operation. So they're based out of the U.S. Someone let a police station know that is very close to Bellevue. They are in Washington. Let them know that this organization is the ones who killed the Raphae family. And this police department, one of the detectives from that police department contacted Bellevue Police Department and let them know. And that lead was not followed up on. The lead that probably gives me the most anxiety and literally makes my eyes burn is the third one. This is from the FBI. They legitimately, y'all, call the Bellevue Police Department and let them know that they have an informant. They let them know that this FBI informant not only knows the people involved in the murder, but knows what the weapon is, and this is before they knew the weapon. Also knows where they live, where they work, what their phone number is, everything. So, of course, the FBI flies out this informant to Bellevue, Washington. And this informant says that he knew the man who ordered the murder. He knew who committed the murder because days after the murder happened, he actually seen the guy, and he had a bat in his trunk and told him that that's how he murdered the Raphae family. He murdered them with a bat. He also then went ahead and wrote down the work addresses, home addresses, phone numbers, and had pictures of the actual people he was talking about. So it wasn't just like, oh, it's some guy named, Greg. He works at, the car lot. No, he had like his full name, where he lives, where he works, where he spends his quality time, when's his birthday. Like, he had all this information, y'all. And what really irritates me to no end, they show the paper in the documentary that this guy give them, or person, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl, but that this informant give them, and at the bottom it says disapproved. All of these leads were disapproved and never moved forward on. One of the quotes that literally gives me all of the anxiety in the entire world is by the lead investigator in the Burns Raphae case. Quote, "Can you investigate every single tip to the 10th degree? No, you can't. But the reality is you have to come back to where the evidence is and follow the evidence, and that will lead you to the killers," end quote. So now I'm going to share with you the actual evidence that pointed away from Burns and Morphe. The evidence that pointed away from them is, number one, there was a hair found in the bedroom where Dr. Morphe's body was found, and the hair does not match Burns or Atif Morphe. The hair is just like a mysterious hair to someone. Also, in the garage of the home, investigators found blood that did not belong to Burns or Morphe. Then there's probably the most, notorious one, which is the time of the murder. As you guys know, the timeline that I shared with you all in the beginning, they went to dinner across the street to the Lion King Theater. Then they went to an all-night diner and had hash browns and milkshakes. Then they went to a club. The club was closed. And then they went from Seattle all the way back home to Bellevue. So, of course, during all of this, they questioned the neighbors. There's neighbors on either side of the home. The first neighbor is a lady, and she says, "Oh yeah, I was upstairs and I was reading a book and I started to hear this banging noise, and it couldn't have been any later than 9:30 p.m. Then they questioned the neighbor on the opposing side, like the other neighbor, and he says, "Yeah, I didn't know the neighbors really well. They had just moved in. So I heard like construction of some kind, so I figured they were like hanging up a sign or something. I didn't really know what they were doing, but it was at 9:30 p.m. Well, at 9:30 p.m., Atif and Sebastian were at the movies. They were at the movie theater. And as we already discussed, there is a witness to them being at the movie theater. So now the evidence that the Bellevue Police Department, well, at least the lead investigator says, points both Morphe and Burns at the, evidence that points Burns and Morphe as the murderers. Morphe and Burns had been at Morphe's parents or the Morphes for 5 days, and on the 5th day they decided to have a night on the town. Now let me ask you a question. If you are going on a night on the town, would you bathe? Would you shower? Also, before I tell you the evidence, would you wash your underwear? The only two things that point them as the murderers is they know for sure that the killer showered, and down in the drain there were 22 hairs that belonged to Sebastian Burns, and they say that they know that the killer showered because Dr. Morphe's blood was found in the shower. So because Sebastian's hair, when he had been staying there for 5 days, was in the shower, that means that he killed him. Also, the other part of evidence that they claim is evidence pointing towards them being the killers is that their underwear was in the washer. You heard me right. Their underwear was in the washer. So yeah, those are the two pieces of evidence that the Bellevue Police Department had pointing them in the direction of the murder. Now we're going to fast forward to July 18th, 1995. And this is when the Bellevue Police Department and the RCMP are working like together. And they time this up in perfect timing for the sting. And they basically released to the press, there's going to be DNA and blood samples released from the underwear found in the washer, and that these two are going to be convicted. Now, this particular day, they have Sebastian Burns there. And they're basically telling Sebastian, look, we can get rid of this evidence and we can keep you out of jail, but we have to know the truth. Atif was not going with Sebastian to see Al and Gary. This in particular day, they request to see Atif. They're questioning him. They're like, okay, I can help you. We can get rid of the evidence. We can keep you all out of jail, but you all have got to tell us the truth. They say, hey, look, we know people and we can help you guys, but you have to tell us exactly what happened. They even go as far as saying, we want to talk to Jimmy Miyoshi as well, and we want to know the facts. And so they tell them that they did it, and their whole story is of course being recorded. And you guys, it doesn't even make sense. They end up saying that they left the movie theater and didn't go anywhere else, and that doesn't make sense because there's witnesses. Just a lot of things that they're saying. Sebastian also pretty much takes accountability for the entire thing and says that Atif was sitting on the couch when that was proven by blood spatter experts that didn't happen, because they said that there was a whole body standing next to them on the other side of the bed when whoever killed Dr. Rafay was being killed. The whole operation just doesn't work if the suspects don't need help, and they needed help. They needed to get rid of this evidence that the newspaper media was saying that they had. In the documentary, they also have like Atif Rafay's voice. Of course, he is in prison, and so it's like a recording of his voice. He says, quote, we felt this was the only way out, and they demanded Atif in order for the help. So Atif went, and so did Jimmy Miyoshi. They were asking Atif, like, why did you do it? And he said, for the money, so that we could have, you know, this lifestyle, etc. Just like Ken was saying, who was the wrongfully convicted scholar, he was saying that, you know, they were two 19-year-olds against two highly trained federal agents. So he said, no matter how many times that you tell yourself that you may not, you know, even if you're innocent, you would never say that you did something if you were innocent. He said, don't be so sure. And you guys, they do give a confession that doesn't make any sense, but it's still technically a confession. And so the very next day, they are arrested. Like I said, they are originally arrested in Canada, but the Bellevue Police Department, as you can probably imagine, are like, nay, and they want them extradited back to Washington. They want them there. And 6 years later, they get that extradition. So these two boys were in prison in Canada for 6 years, and then were extradited to Washington. Now, Jim and Miyoshi, very shortly after Burns and Rafay were arrested, Jimmy Miyoshi was threatened by police and by prosecution, saying that he would be charged if he did not testify against Burns and Rafay. And so he took this sweet deal and said he would testify and went to Tokyo. He was like, and bye. The methods used for Mr. Big, these tapes, are illegal in the United States and illegal in Canada now. However, the judge went ahead and said that they would be allowed. And can y'all believe that was the only evidence that they had against Rafay and Burns? That was it, was the tapes. Burns' first attorneys that were appointed towards him, one of them, her name was Teresa Olsen, and she decided that she was going to fly to Tokyo and go talk to Jimmy Miyoshi and see if she could get him to say the truth and save these two boys' lives. And she goes over there and everything goes perfect. He's like, yes, as long as you can still promise me that I'm not going to go to jail. Because he's basically saying, I didn't do nothing wrong, so I ain't going to jail. And so he decides he's going to help them instead. And so Teresa Olsen comes back. She calls Dave Burns. and lets him know. She calls Sebastian Burns and lets him know. Everybody is all excited, thinking, because this would turn the whole entire case around. Then the next really big thing happens. And Teresa Olsen is caught by 3 correctional officers having sex with Sebastian Burns. And her and, I think his name was Bill Fox, was the attorney, was dismissed. And so then the trial was put off another 2 years. Pretty much the tape said that Sebastian did everything. Atif sat on the couch, which didn't make any sense. There was no forensic evidence at all that connected the two to the crime whatsoever. And of course, there was this mysterious hair and mysterious blood in the garage that was never answered. Jimmy Miyoshi does end up testifying against Burns and Afay, saying that they did admit to killing the Afay family. And at the end of it all, they were both convicted of 3 counts of murder, guilty on all 3. Now, both of them did make statements during court, and the judge was not having it. He shut it completely down, that nobody in their right mind would admit to a crime that they did not commit. Even if you're 19 years old and you have 2 highly trained federal agents, basically, you know, and there was also a private investigator who spoke during this documentary, a very highly trained, like more highly trained than I've ever seen a private investigator. He actually did undercover work for the FBI, and he spoke about this mission that he had one time for these corrupt DEA agents, and said that he acted as if he was a mob boss, and the way that these DEA agents would brag. He said it's called criminal bragging, and he said it's when they basically, you know, just start bragging of what all they've done, criminalizing their own selves. And that is what you will see in the tapes with Sebastian Burns. He even interrupts Al and Greg several times to let them know of things that doesn't make sense. He says that the bat was thrown in a trash can, like just things that doesn't add up. Now, Burns ended up spending 10 years, y'all, 10 years in solitary confinement before finally getting out and getting put in general population. His father still goes and sees him regularly. Rafay ended up getting married, and the woman that he got married to also speaks in the documentary. Now, there are appeals for the Burns-Rafay case. This is one of the appeals that Kim Kardashian West is actually involved in. So if I can find the appeal, I was trying to find the appeal before filming this and couldn't, but if I can find the appeal, then this will be in the video, and I will have it linked down below if you would like to sign in their appeal. All right, you guys, I hope that you so enjoyed the first episode of Beauty and Documentary Breakdown. I am so excited for this. I am just over the moon happy, and I hope you guys are excited as well. And do be sure that you did comment the secret emoji down in the comment section down below for an extra entry into my 100 subscriber giveaway, which all you have to do is be subscribed, and for extra entries, you can comment the secret emoji. I love you guys so much, and until the next Beauty and Documentary Breakdown, bye guys.